These two chapters really focus on the importance of understanding working before a potential crisis occurs to prepare accordingly. I'm going to outline the steps of crisis participation that's discussed in Coombs in chapters 5 and 6, and then hopefully we'll understand the importance at the very end of developing a crisis management plan. One of the activities that you're going to work on for this week is diagnosing vulnerabilities or seeing where there might potentially be a problem in the future. This is a little bit of forecasting, assuming that with all things being equal, for your type of organization, X, Y, and Z is likely to happen. And really here we're focusing on those two things that we discussed in earlier chapters, likelihood and impact. It could very well be that something is very unlikely to happen, but it has such a large impact that we want to prepare for it because it's going to throw the organization into turmoil. It could also be that something has a very, very low impact, but a very, very high probability of occurring and may occur more than once. So that's also something that we want to prepare for. So it's not just that we have a very large likelihood and a very large impact. We're going to have to do work in between those as well. These two chapters give a pretty detailed description of crisis types, and that's really located on page 67 of chapter 5. I really believe that Coombs' crisis types that we discussed in last week's module are a better descriptor of the types of crises that can affect an organization and how we should really abstractly think of them. But I do think the crisis types that are mentioned here are something that we should make note of and just keep in the back of our minds. A good portion of Chapter 5 is really focused on the selection and training of a crisis management team. And actually, I believe this should probably be the first step because the trained and the selected team are the ones that are really going to figure out what those vulnerabilities are going to be. They're also going to be the ones that are going to assess the crisis types. So this should probably have been first. And the trained team is really critical for a number of reasons. First, because it is a diverse body that covers the most important areas within an organization. So you're going to have communication professionals there, but you're also going to have legal experts there. You're also going to have members of the executive that are going to participate because the diversity allows the organization to see how a crisis is going to affect multiple angles of the organization and what can be done within those different domains to help alleviate the crisis or minimize the impact. So a diverse crisis team is critical, and training this team and working through the materials that they eventually produce is what is going to determine a successful crisis response. You also need to make sure that there is at least one spokesperson for the crisis management team, and this is not usually the CEO of an organization. The CEO can be very helpful in making some communications at different periods of time, but you really want someone who is directly and always on point. So they are the person that is always available to the media. They are the person who's reaching out to the media. They are the person who's reaching out to stakeholders to let them know what's happening and to keep people informed. And this is also really important that you train this individual. And this goes well beyond public speaking. So this person needs to be very good in written communication. This person needs to be very good on camera in various forms. So however you plan to release information, this person needs to know how to look and sound like a competent professional. Chapter 6 talks extensively about the development of a crisis management plan and what that entails. A crisis management plan is a rubric to be followed in the event of a crisis. It does not tell step by step every single movement of every person in the crisis management team. And it can't, because every crisis is actually unique. So there are certain things that we know we're going to need. For example, we're going to need a a press kit that has information that we can readily send out to media to help them cover the crisis. And that serves us a couple of functions. One, it lets the media know that we are in constant contact with them and that we are open to giving them information. But two, it doesn't take time away from us because we've already collected and organized those materials. But each crisis is going to be unique, so at the end of the day, the press release that we send out is going to be specific to the crisis that we are experiencing. So it provides a layout of the types of communication and the types of activities that we're going to need to engage in, but in the end, everything must be adapted to the specific crisis that we are handling at that specific moment. Only a little over 3/4 of organizations even have a crisis management plan, and even fewer have something that is a structured communication system. So this is really important because what you want to make sure is that you have an area, and this could be a specific on-site place. It could also be somewhere online where the members of the crisis management team can communicate with each other and information can flow freely. Choosing a site that is separate from the organization itself can be critical, because if the site itself is compromised and that's where your command center is located, then you're going to have to create a new makeshift command center. And that's why some have argued for mobile command centers so that you're not stuck to a specific location or area. But it's really important to think about those types of things ahead of time. What is your mass communication system like? Do you have a way to reach a lot of people in a very short period of time? So thinking about that ahead of time can make it easier when you're constructing your crisis management plan to think about the types of messages that you can send over this mass communication system. A final contingency in training is actually going through practice scenarios and seeing how well this plan that you've put together works. It's not enough to say, oh, well, I have a crisis management plan and it tells me what I need to do. You need to see it working in action because only then can you begin to diagnose problems with your crisis management plan that you do not want to deal with in the event of a crisis. So running through practice scenarios is a wonderful way to test your assumptions that you have made about how things will work in the crisis management plan.